homeschooling kids of multiple ages, especially if you've got a range of them rather than stair-step kids, can feel overwhelming and difficult. But it doesn't have to be that way in reality. So today I am joining with Nikki from Homeschoolology and a few other ladies to share some of those tips and tricks that we've learned along the way. If you are new here, welcome. I'm Tricia. I'm a homeschooling mom, 3 kiddos, 14 years of homeschooling. So I've learned a few things, and my kids are now, I've got one who's a freshman in college, one who's a freshman in high school, and my youngest is a 7th grader. So I've been there, done that with the little ages, and I've seen what's worked and what's not worked for our family. So today, that's what I'm going to share with you are some of the tips, especially I've got a few very practical ones that have helped us to successfully manage a range of ages. Now, the first thing I will say is that my approach was to bring up the littles to the higher level. When we started Story of the World, for example, my daughter, I think, was a second grader, I believe. So obviously that put the boys really young, but they joined us. Did they understand it all? No, not at all. But they started learning those habits, and they took in more than I would have thought, especially Ben. Matthew, of course, was just little. But that's always been my approach, is that we bring the littles up to a higher level rather than trying to find a middle one or somehow meet in the middle, whatever that looks like. For us, that's been what's been the most successful way of doing it. The other approach that I took was that each year I would prioritize what kids needed the most help with what. Meaning that, like when Matthew was learning to read, obviously that needed more of my attention than some other subjects. So prioritizing a curriculum that was directly mom-led for reading was important. For each of my kiddos, until they move to an outsourced math class, math is a priority for us, for mom to be leading it. So that would mean that if I, with 3 kids, that meant I had to prioritize my time so that not everyone was going to be able to get me all the time, but math was an important one. When my daughter was a freshman, now, high school, I knew that she'd be mostly independent, but I knew that it was also going to be a big learning curve, and there was. So that year for science, my boys mostly just watched science documentaries and played outside in the woods, which seems, we'll just call it unschooling. But I needed that extra time, and it worked. They learned so much, and then the next year we were able to do more formal science. But that is just some examples of ways that I prioritized each year who needed what from me and how I was going to do it. Now, one less practical tip, and then we'll get into some more practical ones. My very first tip for you is to acknowledge that all your kids are different. That seems really basic, but I'm sure if you haven't experienced it yourself, I'm sure you've seen it with others, parents who get very frustrated because, this curriculum worked for kids 1, 2, and 3, but not for 4. Kiddo number 4 may just be different. Maybe it worked fine for the others, but it wasn't the one they needed to thrive. Who knows? But acknowledging that your kids are different, and that might mean different approaches, different curriculum, it's going to save you a lot of heartache and a lot of frustration if you just acknowledge that from the beginning. Now, practical tips. My very first thing to tell you is to teach your kids some way of collecting their questions while you're working with others. And I did that with these little Post-it notes. These are the little flags. My kids keep these, and as they have questions about, maybe they come across a math problem that they don't understand, they take it, put it next to it. If they come across directions for writing and they don't understand it, again, put it on their paper. And then when they're done with that subject and close the book, they've got those little Post-it notes hanging out the side. Stack it up so that when you move on, when you get done with whatever kiddo you're helping with and you are ready for questions, they've got a stack of things that are ready to ask you. And I will also say that as a side benefit, if my kids have to pull out one of these and put it on there, they're more likely to consider whether they really need help with it or if they just didn't want to think it through, honestly. So, Post-it notes. Tip number 2, and this one is has a double bonus. We listen to most of our audiobooks that we need to listen to or read alouds or even individual books for the kids as audiobooks in the car. Now, if you're a family who lives in a smaller town, you don't drive a lot, this may not be a benefit for you, but we drive about half an hour to and each way wherever we're going. So we're in the car a lot. Now, one benefit, obviously, is that you're saving some time during the day. Time that you would normally be sitting down reading with one or more kids, you're going to do it in the car. So that's a definite benefit, time-wise. The other benefit is that you'll be amazed at the vocabulary and storylines that your littlest ones pick up on. For example, when we did Harry Potter, Matthew was just 6. And for the first several chapters, the British accent was more than what he could get through. So he wasn't really listening. But then, all of a sudden, he was picking up on these complex storylines in the first book and picking up the vocabulary. Like, what? Well, he was paying just enough attention. He was. When we first started audiobooks, he was 2, not quite 2. And by the time he was 2.5, and we were listening to like the really cheesy ones like The Boxcar Children and A to Z Mysteries, he would use words that were in it, or he would mention a character that was in it. I'm like, how did you focus on that? But sure enough, he was doing it. So it's a great way to, build the listening skills for everybody and imagination, storyline, all of that, but it's also a benefit for the littlest among us. As for organizing your schedule, what we preferred to do was anything that we were doing as a family, history, science, that sort of thing, we did very first thing in the day. Now, ideally, I don't like to start with history and science, but it allowed us that we got all those together work things done first, and then the kids can kind of do their own individual things. And so as my daughter had a longer day, the boys, once they finished their things, could go on and play. And that allowed, it wasn't a matter of that I would have to call the boys back so we could do our together work. Now, as my kids got older and we weren't dealing with nap time anymore or such, we moved that history and science and other together work into the afternoon. So it was still the first thing we did, but in the afternoon. And then usually the boys went off to play afterwards while Elizabeth would finish up her work. And speaking of play, my last tip for you is to make sure that you have good educational toys available. so that when your little ones are done with their day, they still have things to occupy them in your school space. Also, if you have, like, if a kid is out of work that they can do independently while they're waiting for you, they've got good educational toys to play with. And by educational toys, I don't necessarily mean like something that's truly educational, but something that is good kind of play. And I did a video all about this that I will link here as well. But things that inspire creativity, imagination, outside toys, if that's an option for your homeschool, is good too. For example, things like magnet tiles. These, we bought these when, I don't know, we were still in El Paso, which means Matthew was 3 maybe? He's 12 now. These still get played with in our school days. Last year, when my daughter was a senior, more than once she would come down when she was finished with her morning work. She would come down and grab the magnet tiles and play while we finished up our stuff. So things like this, Legos, linking tiles, stacking cubes, balance, all those little things are a great option, in addition to things like crayons and other non-messy art supplies. Anything that keeps them in the space, creative, using their imagination while your school day is still going on. And if you want to see more ideas for quiet time toys, you can click on the video on your screen, I think over there, I don't know, and go check out an old video I had sharing some of the ones that we really liked when my kiddos were younger. Oh, and don't forget to go click on the playlist to check out other people's ideas for you, and I will see you in the next video.